Well, have I got a restoration project to undergo, and I'm going to bring you all along on the ride with me. So if you're ready to see this rather sad looking vintage chair, which has a lot of history, memories and mould to get to grips with, be restored from start to finish into its former glory, just keep on watching. So, a little backstory on this chair, and let's take a closer inspection to see what we are dealing with here. This is a 1950s Parker Knoll Froxfield chair. Founded in 1869, Parker Knoll have been making high quality furniture for 150 years. The Froxfield chair is a 1950s model, so not quite antique, but definitely vintage. And this chair has been in the family for as long as I've been alive, and sadly had been left in a shed to rot, just waiting for a new lease of life. So what is the damage? Well, as you can see, the whole chair is covered in mould, of all colours of the rainbow. A Technicolor dream chair, but make it mould. We have green mould, black mould, white mould. Many things are growing on this. It's covered in damp stains and is essentially a biohazard at this point. So the fabric is well and truly ruined, the legs were stripped to a pale wood finish, not really in keeping with the original chair, so we're going to bring those back and repair some knocks and scratches. The damp environment just rusted everything metal, so all the staples are now encrusted into the fabric. The braiding has fallen off, and it really smells damp and musty. So this is a complete strip back to the skeleton job, and I cannot wait to get stuck in and learn the process of upholstery. So let's get going and see what we uncover. The Froxfield chair was part of a group of three: the Froxfield, the Frith wing chair, and by 1967 a matching two-seater sofa, and I will personally be on the lookout for some of these matching pieces in the future, especially a wing back. It would be really cool to get the gang back together. So this chair has actually been reupholstered twice before, but we didn't know whether the original tapestry fabric was still underneath, and I was surprised to find out it actually was. Years ago, the original tapestry fabric started to wear away at the arms, with the horsehair poking through, so this got reupholstered once with this fabric but in a red colourway, and once again after in the fabric I've just removed, because it got considerably grubby, probably from being our previous pet's favourite sleeping chair at the time. The design of the Froxfield was elegant rather than contemporary, but even today the personality of the chair depends on the fabric. Medieval style floral prints went well with it, as was on this model, as did contemporary fabrics and simple velvet colours. Here are a few reupholstered Froxfields, and you can see their versatility. It has been definitely over 10 years since I've seen this fabric, and it's bringing back memories. If it hadn't been infested with mould, I would have considered restoring, but unfortunately it's way too far gone. Plus, it's not really the style we had envisioned for our current living room. So it was time to remove the original fabric and see what was in the backrest. I originally thought it was just going to be some kind of foam, but because it's so old, foam didn't really come into commercial use in chairs till around the 60s, and this one is using kapok fibre, which is a cotton-like fibre that's used to stuff chairs and other furniture pieces. So this was flying in the wind all over the place, all over the street, and I needed to get it into the bag. At this point I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I wanted to reuse it, hopefully, and I did, and I will tell you a little bit more about that and how to do it later on. I also uncovered the original back tack that was on the back of the chair. This was completely rusted on and was extremely difficult to get off. So as I ripped this chair to pieces, letting the mold spores fly into my lungs somewhere, where did we get it and what's the history of the Parker Knoll chair? The Parker Knoll Froxfield chair was introduced in 1955 and stopped production in the 1980s. It was designed to be a small but comfortable chair ideal for small rooms and has a classic mid-century style frame that is versatile and has a timeless feel for arguably any interior design. And this particular chair was bought from a local charity shop some 20 odd years ago, before either me or my sibling was born, to be used as a nursing chair. So it's funny to think the chair had a role in my upbringing, and now I'm repaying it back with a new reupholstering. So it was bought for a steal at roughly £15. I actually found some old catalogues of the chair advertisements in the 50s costing around £14 and 17 shillings, which would be around £280 in today's money, and some nicely restored Froxfields with William Morris fabrics on them can sell upwards from £1,000 today, and it's safe to say it was definitely a bargain. Now as I got down to the arm sides, of course there was more mould, no surprise there really. This can't be salvaged. In some cases it might be able to keep the webbing or the hessian, but this is going to go in the bin. But on the other hand, the horsehair and natural fibre filling that I found can be salvaged. It's not gross to reuse this even in this state because it can be washed and makes for a better restoration project if you can use the original fillings, and will actually make your chair more valuable if you have restored it correctly and using the same fillings that were used when it was made. So make sure that you do that and don't just cover it up with foam. I've seen a few channels do this and it's such a shame to see it, so in this case we're going to try and do it as correctly as possible. I also found a new penny from 1971, actually a half penny, and unfortunately it's not rare, but this was in the chair and came from a time when they were decimalising the money, essentially getting rid of the half pennies and moving them up to round numbers. So that's a cool little find, and was surprised to see that in the chair actually. So as I get down to the frame, I'll share a few fond memories I remember of this chair. I do recall as a child sitting in this chair on weekends or summer holidays, playing some kind of games console, must have been the Xbox at the time, picking away at the horsehair arms when I probably shouldn't have been, and playing the game Vex or replaying Xbox demo discs, thinking they were the full games and never getting very far. Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb, I am thinking of you right now. But games aside, as kids we also used to love taking the cushion off of this chair and bouncing on the springs with my brother like we had our own mini trampoline or tightrope situation. Was probably a bit dangerous, come to think of it now. So after spending a full day pulling out hundreds of staples from this chair, I could finally give it a good proper wash and clean and get rid of all that mould. I also discovered some of the trademarks and the sticker that said it was inspected by M. Thornton, so shout out to him. He said it was a-okay to go, and he's probably not with us anymore, but he did a good job checking this chair over, I imagine. So gave the legs a little bit of attention with a bit of a sand, and I filled up a few cracks and a few areas that needed filling. After that I thought I would give it a little bit of a moisturising with a little bit of linseed oil, just to recondition the wood a little bit before I would varnish it. Hopefully it would make it a little less streaky. It's really not that necessary to do this, but you've got to get those shots, those aesthetic shots. There was also a few nicks and broken pieces, and I just fixed those with a little bit of glue, gave them a little sand and a press with a clamp, and they fitted back in perfectly. So the chair was down to the bare bones, the bare frame, and it was cleaned up and it's ready to varnish. So I used this walnut varnish. If you've been following my channel, I use it on a few projects so far, and I love this colour. And as you can see on the top of the arm rest, the piece of wood there, that is a very brown mahogany colour, so we want to match that as close as possible to get it back to the original finish. This took about 3 coats, but if I'm completely honest with you, it actually took double that, because I ended up having to sand this all back again for a second time and redo the varnish all over again. I think I was either too eager in between drying time and it just turned really sticky the next day. Either that or there was a reaction to the varnish I will show in a second that I used on top. So not sure what happened there, but I had to redo this all again. But this is how they looked the second time anyways. So a lovely dark walnut brown and back to the original colouring, what they would have been before. So it was time to clean the fillings for the chair. For the horsehair I just used water, soap and a little bit of bleach. You can wash this in a bag in the washing machine if you want, but I just took mine out and just washed it by hand. It was easier that way because I had quite a large amount. So I just did that and rinsed it a few times and let it dry in the sun. It was pretty easy. So before I knew this fibre was kapok, I thought it might have been wool fibre, so I didn't know exactly how to clean it yet. But if you check and burn a little piece with a lighter and it smells like burning hair, you know that you might have wool. If not, then you have kapok probably. Now, from the limited articles that I could find online of how to clean this stuff, they all say don't machine wash it, so I thought I'd give hand washing a try and try and get the musty smell out of it. This stuff is super water repellent. You can wet this stuff and it will still be dry, and it's also like 50 times more buoyant than cork, so it likes to float on the surface. This yellow water that's coming out of it, I believe is dye and not dirt. It's a little bit like beetroot. You could wash beetroot forever and ever and ever and it will still be pink water, so I think that's just what it is. This stuff is antimicrobial, it doesn't pick up mold, it doesn't attract mites and things like that, so this is a perfect filling for the insulation of chairs, and really actually in hindsight didn't need to be cleaned at all. Some people say that washing this stuff can ruin the fibres, but after naturally drying it in the greenhouse, it seemed to come back to its original state and was fine, other than just being less clumpy as it was before. But I did try to dry this in the tumble dryer, but I think it just did not work. It just needs to be air dried in my opinion, unless you have a very small amount. So yeah, that was my experience with kapok, and it was very interesting. So before I could start reupholstering this chair, I needed some tools. There was no way in hell I was using one of those hand staplers. I heard horror stories from my mum using this hand staplers and it just doesn't work out very well. But the air compressor staplers were way too expensive. So I opted for this New Master electric stapler, and also it is a brad nailer as well, which is small nails. So we're going to test out and see how this works. Just to let you know, any products or businesses that I mention in this video are not sponsored. I paid £50 for this to Amazon, so Jeff has that now. But yeah, let's test this out. It has a little dial for max, so we're going to try it on low first to see what the power is like. So I was pretty surprised with this. That was the low setting there, as you can see it sticks up a bit, and the higher setting is really flush, and that was without me pressing on the top of the stapler. I can't review it for the brad nailer setting, but for the staples, this whole project, it really did an amazing job. I had no problems with it, and I really recommend it if you're a beginner to upholstery and you can't afford the compressor, or it's too much out of your budget to get one of those. Definitely go down this electric gun route. It's a really good one. For all the upholstery supplies and materials that I needed for this project, I used Heritage components. They had an amazing website with everything that I needed on it. They also shipped to Ireland, which for some reason, trying to find an upholstery company online that shipped here without crazy fees was a miracle. So yeah, I found all this stuff and I'm going to show you what I got. So the first thing I got was some hessian. This is going to go on the base of the chair to create the structure. Then I also got dacron or polyester boarding. This is going to line the chair and make it smooth. This is stockinette, and that will slide over the foam insert of the cushion to make it easier to get on. I also got some general lining fabric, and this stuff is wool, cotton, felt. This is going to smooth over any lumps and bumps and just bulk out the chair a little bit, but you'll see later. It also creates a smoother surface. I also got some piping cord, a continuous zipper which I'll be using for the cushion insert, and some jute webbing. This will add structure to the chair and create supports in the arms. I also got some cardboard back tack, which can help create a smooth finish, and some metal back tack, or I think it's called a 3-ply tack or something like that. And this will be used to create a seamless finish on the back when putting the back piece on the chair. And of course I also have the horsehair and the kapok filling as well. So now we have all the materials, it's ready to actually get started on this chair. So the first thing to do was to take my hessian, and we just want to line the front and the back of the chair in this. You can do this kind of double over technique to make it extra strong, and just staple up the sides so you have some of the structure of the chair coming back again, so you have a base to work from. The next stage was just to add the jute webbing to the side panels of the arms. This essentially just creates a barrier and stops the fabric from pushing inwards and deforming essentially. So that's what I did here. When it comes to chairs, most of them are structured the same way, so the same rules for upholstery applies pretty much around all the chairs. But certain chairs are structured differently, so it can be helpful to take pictures beforehand if you're not sure how to put it back together again. This particular chair was a little bit tricky in places due to the fact that the front leg extends up the detail into the arms, and it's not two separate pieces like a leg on the bottom and then an armrest piece. So it was a little bit tricky in places for this, but I figured it out in the end. Once I had done the hessian and the jute webbing and the main structure of the chair, it was time to make that original pocket that had all the kapok filling in. So I do a lot of things here where I'm putting on things backwards and flipping them up so I get a nice seam. That's a pretty handy trick to have clean edges. So I'm just gonna fill the cushion backrest back up and just shove it down and make sure it's pretty much even. I ended up doing this on the floor because it was easier to get the even amount, and just wrap the calico lining over the top and secure it in place and make sure it's really tight. This was a little bit tricky to do, but it worked out. Because I had salvaged the same amount, I knew that I was going to get the same chair and not a little bit less or anything like that. I will also be adding on some extra pieces to make it a little bit more soft. To get the right tension on your fabric when you're pulling the lining fabric in and your finishing fabric or anything that you're putting on top of the chair, you need those back side panels open so that you can pull the fabric through. I didn't know this at the beginning and just kind of closed them up when I put the Hessian on. So make sure you keep those open and don't waste your staples undoing them. So with the backrest done, it was time to get on to plumping out the arms again. So I just took all the horsehair, split it into two so I had an even amount on both sides, and just piled it up. I popped a few staples in now and again to keep it in place. Yeah, it's just a matter of just putting it on and just pushing it into place really until it feels right. It will look probably very, very bulky, but once you get that lining fabric over the top and securing in place, it will flatten down quite a lot. To ease the transition of bulkiness in the armrest and the side panels, I added a bit of the wool felt, sandwiched it between the lining fabric so that it made a much more smoother finish. I will be adding an extra layer of wadding as well before I put the finished fabric on, so any lumps and bumps will be smoothed out for sure. So after wrapping the lining fabric and sandwiching all those fillings inside, we have finally got a fully fleshed out chair again. And the next stage was to just add a little bit of extra cushioning before the final fabric. So with the wool felt, I'm going to add a layer of that. I'm using this adhesive spray, which is the kind of spray you can use for carpets and things like that. It's super, super tacky and will just hold it in place whilst I'm fiddling around with it. So I'm going to add that on top, and then on top of that I'm going to add a bit of the wadding. Probably not necessary because the fabric I will be using is quite thick anyways, but this helps smooth out any edges and the line of the chair will just look a lot smoother when you add this wadding on top. I repeated adding the wadding onto the arms as well after this. So you're all probably wondering, what fabric am I going to be using for the chair? Well, I am happy to say that I'm using a vintage tweed. Now this tweed was bought 20 years ago in a charity shop for probably a few pounds and has never been used since and has been stuck in a cupboard. And we just remembered about it and it looked perfect for the chair, and it has this fleck of blue stripe in it which goes with our living room, which is just perfect. So it's really meant to be, I believe, for this chair, and it's funny how things work out sometimes. But anyway, we don't have quite enough for the seat cushion, so I'm going to be ordering a contrast blue velvet for the seat. So after reupholstering the backrest, the blue velvet fabric came. Now on the camera it does look very bright and the true colour doesn't really translate well on camera. I was hoping for a little bit of a deeper shade, as you'll see in the pictures from the website I ordered from, which is Textile Express. I ordered the Clark & Clark Alva Royal Blue, and as you can see it's more of a deep blue, but I think it purely just depends on what light's shining on it. We have a very dark room, so I think it'll be okay. They also had loads of cute cushion panels and ended up picking a gnome wedding one, so that kind of made up for the colour differences in the product photos. Before I can upholster the arms in the final fabric, I need to make up the piping that's going to go around the armrest first and attach that before anything else. So to do this, I just took 2-inch wide strips of velvet fabric. I just measured around the arm and leave yourself about 1 inch or 2 just to make sure that you don't fall short. I have to make up a load of piping for the box cushion that I will be making later on, so I'm just making a bunch here. I just sandwiched the piping cord in between and made sure it was a half. I also used a zipper foot for this to make it a little bit easier. Also, I would recommend to make sure that when you are sewing the piping with the velvet that you're sewing in the direction of the pile. If you go the opposite way, you're going to have troubles here, like things not lining up, and it's going to be tricky to sew because it just doesn't want to work with you. So make sure to go with the pile and not against the pile on this. And the piping is pretty much done, and it was time to start lining out and making some kind of a pattern with the fabric. Now it's quite tricky doing this because I have lines on this fabric, so I needed to make sure that they were all straight. So I do this backwards method to make sure it's lined up correctly, and it's really just trial and error with this. And just make sure it's super smooth, and make sure to put the wadding on before, because I did forget to put wadding on and just went straight ahead. I was also running out of fabric running in the right direction for the bottom panel of the chair underneath the cushion, so I had to do a little bit of secret sewing to match up. So we are really actually flying through this chair now, and it's time to use the back tack. Now, normally people would staple these to the chair, but I can't because my staple is a little bit too bulky to get in the crevices of where the holes are. So I ended up having to just nail the whole thing. Pretty loud and annoying, but it worked out the same way. It just takes a little longer. So I'm just going down the edges of the chair along the top line of the chair, and yeah, you got to be careful with this because you can get cuts, and I will show you how this works in a sec. So once you have all your pieces upholstered from your backrest and your arm, you pull all those pieces to the back, and this final back piece is going to cover all those edges that you've stapled on and don't want on show. But you also don't want the staples on show from the back piece either. So these metal teeth grip your fabric in a little channel essentially, and then you fold that back up like here and hammer it closed. So it essentially folds and grips your fabric over itself and secures itself in place, so you don't have to have any staples on show, and gives a really seamless finish. This is definitely a must for this type of thing and really makes a big difference in the finished result. I've learnt so much on this project, and filming the process of this had been actually a really good help, and it's quite a good tip if you're scared to bring something right down to the frame and build it back up. As long as you have a few pictures and videos, you can refer to them back to make sure you can put it back together again properly. I also learnt a bunch from the YouTube channel Facelift Interiors and Neil's videos. They're really good for beginners, and he teaches you all about the tips and tricks of the trade essentially, and how to get a really professional finish, and they were really helpful videos, so check them out. Was to put the bottom liner on, or a dust cover essentially. I'm just using this weed control barrier that we have in the garage. It's probably not regulation safe, but it kind of does the job the same way. But if you're trying to follow the rules, maybe use the proper flame retardant back lining, which is just a black material. So I just pop that on the bottom of the chair to cover up all of the messy bits. Now with the cushion foam, this isn't the original cushion foam, which is a shame. I don't know what happened to the original cushion, but all I know is that it was a lot thinner than what is on there currently, so I decided to cut it down a little bit. This was actually a waste of time because I ended up gluing it back on, because the box cushion pillow cover that I made fitted way better when it was just more bulky, so I ended up putting back that anyways. So now we're on to the cushion cover. Now I challenged myself here trying to make a box cushion. I measured the back and the front of the cushion, which were slightly different measurements, so you need to make sure to do it so that it will fit the form of the chair, and possibly also measure the chair as well, and just cut out 2 facings. So for the box cushion, this is tricky, so I probably recommend to go to an expert on this, but I'm just telling you my process here. So I cut out 2 facings, and I cut out piping enough to go around those 2 seat pad pieces. Then I cut enough zip to go around the back of the cushion, and then an extra 2 inches over that so that it's easy to get the sponge filling in. To make the zip panels, I took the pillow depth and halved that to fold it for 2 kind of columns of fabric that will then sandwich the zip together. And I also just measured the depth of the cushion and the circumference of the full seat pad and cut out a long strip for the depth that's gonna sandwich those 2 facings together. If you got any of that, well done, because I'm so bad at explaining these things, and this picture here that I've drawn with the little robot face is kind of putting me off. So let's just get on to making this cushion cover. One tip that I will add in that was crucial to this working out, and would have been better if I had followed this exactly, is everything you cut, you want to make half snips in it. So the facings, you want to fold those in half and mark the half points. The same with the piping, and the same with the column of fabric that's going to be going around the depth, because when you sew these on the machine, you want to make sure that they're all lining up so everything fits properly, especially when you add the zip on later, because if you don't, otherwise things can just go a little bit squiffy. So also when I added this piping on, you want to get to the edge and just snip a little bit before you get to the edge, and it can turn it a lot easier too. I also ended up running out of piping cord and ended up using this washing line cord, which is kind of plastic, which did actually work out. It's not the best, but if you're in a pinch, I would recommend using that. It kind of worked out pretty well. So yeah, a little tip for you there. So I pretty much had my cushion nearly done. I added the zip, I added the facings together, I had sandwiched everything together, and I also tried to complicate things even further by adding this sort of like little hidden pouch thing that hides the zip ends, which was probably not necessary and was confusing and didn't line up perfectly. So this chair cushion could be better, but it's a first try, and it's pretty good for a first try in my opinion. So I'm ready to show you the finished shots of the chair. Everything is done and restored, and I'm really happy with the results. I've really enjoyed making these long format videos, and I hope you did too, and it wasn't too boring if you watched through from start to finish. Thank you so much, and I hope you like the result of this restoration. So here it is in the living room in its final place, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you would like to see some more like this.